Hi there, my name is Josh, and I've lived in a quiet and peaceful neighborhood for almost 10 years now. All that time, I had wonderful neighbors that I visited with regularly and had become good friends with. At least I did until my neighbor George fell a few times and his children felt that it would be in his best interest for him to move in with them so that they could look after him. This was of course for the best, but I would deeply miss having George as a neighbor, as he was always cheerful and a pleasure to be around. I especially missed him when Nathan moved in next door. He was around the same age as me, but he was a mean-spirited and rude person. Even his dog had an attitude and was very aggressive towards anyone that wasn't Nathan. It was tragic, but I knew that I just had to accept that things would eventually change. And while I missed having George as a neighbor, that Nathan wasn't going anywhere, and so I just kept to myself. Nathan had moved in during the winter, and that spring I decided that I really wanted to make a large vegetable garden, and so I set out to buy some wood and soil with which to make a few raised beds, and I placed them along the fence that I shared with Nathan. They would be in my yard, so I couldn't possibly think of a reason that he would be against my having them there, but of course, I was wrong. Weeks passed as the seeds I planted began to take root and grow into beautiful plants. Soon after, they began to bear fruits and vegetables that tasted better than anything you can buy in the store. Soon enough, though, the plants began to grow in all directions, and some of the cucumber and pumpkin plants that I planted began to grow through the fence and into his yard.
Hey, keep your garbage on your side of the fence or else I'm going to come over there and chop those things down.
In an attempt to keep the peace, I swore that I would do my best to prevent them from encroaching on his side of the fence. But I also knew that his reaction was a bit over the top. As if Nathan wasn't bad enough, there was a large oak tree that cast a shadow across both of our backyards, and while the shade was nice, it was also hindering the plants in my vegetable garden from growing. George and I had discussed taking it down at some point, but we had never gotten around to do so before he moved away. It was just such an inconvenience since it was right on top of the property line, which meant that both of us had to agree to take it down. A week after Nathan had yelled at me, I came home to find that most of my vegetable garden had been torn apart. In horror, I ran over to find all my beautiful plants ripped to shreds. And among the soil I found dog footprints, and as I followed them, they led across my yard and then over into Nathan's, which left little doubt in my mind as to who was responsible for the destruction. I had no doubt that maybe some of the plants had grown through the fence again, and rather than be a rational person, he decided to let his dog into my yard and then watched in glee as his mean dog destroyed all my hard work and effort. It made me so incredibly angry, but then my gaze drifted from my destroyed garden towards the oak tree, and I instantly formed a plan. You see, what Nathan didn't know was that I worked as a lawyer that specialized in environmental law. I knew that since the tree was right on the property line, that we both had to agree to have it removed, and that if one of us harmed it, then the other could take them to court. And so I set about forming my plan. First, I went to all our bordering neighbors, and I planted the idea that I was so happy that we had the oak tree for shade, and that I wouldn't in a million years want that tree taken down. I made sure to let people know how much I loved that tree, and how much I hoped that it would outlive me. Once I was satisfied that I had made the case that I wouldn't want the tree to be cut down, I then began to throw the leaves and acorns that fell from it into my yard over the fence. I made sure to throw them over in the middle of the night when Nathan wouldn't see me do it. For a couple of weeks I kept doing this, until one day I came home to discover the tree not only knocked down, but it had fallen and crushed part of the fence I shared with Nathan, and even the fence on the other side as well. Somehow, Nathan had managed to chop down the tree and cause a great deal of collateral damage in the process. He, of course, was unapologetic about everything and just waved me and my neighbor off when we told him that he would have to pay to repair the damaged fences.
That's not my problem. It was merely an act of God for the fences to be damaged. Besides, they were obviously weak. After all, that tree wasn't that big.
I tried to explain to him that it was in his best interest to pay for the damages that he caused, but he just flipped me off and just stormed into his house. Smiling, I assured my neighbor that I would handle Nathan and promised him that I had a plan. Since we were such good friends, he chose to trust me, and while he was still upset, he left things in my hands. And so I set about taking pictures of everything, and then went around to all my neighbors and took their statements about both what I had previously told them about the tree and what had happened. A few of them had even watched Nathan cut it down, which was perfect for me. The more evidence I had, the better my case. The next day I went to work and spoke with some colleagues of mine to make sure that I had everything that I would need, and when they agreed with me, I set about subpoenaing Nathan and I took him to court over the damages he had caused. While the damage to the two fences was small enough for us to go to small claims court, the damage to the tree was a whole different matter. You see, the older the tree, the more value that it has, and in our country, there are laws that protect such trees that lie on the border between two properties. Both parties have to agree to their removal, and since I not only did not give him permission to take it down, but I actively didn't want it removed, at least as far as everyone else knew. In the end, the court heard my case and saw all the evidence that I had accumulated and awarded my neighbor and I $2,000 each for us to repair our fences. And as for the tree, after determining its age and value and taking into consideration the malicious nature of Nathan's actions, the court granted me $46,000. Nathan was shocked, of course, but that was how the law was written, and unfortunately for him, ignorance of the law does not make you immune to it. 2 months later, a for sale sign appeared on Nathan's front lawn, and soon after that he moved away. Apparently, he couldn't afford to keep the house after he had lost the $50,000 and he was forced to move into a much smaller apartment across town. The kind elderly couple that bought his home, though, were very pleasant, and I quickly became good friends with them as well. As for my garden, the next spring I rebuilt it and even made it a bit bigger, and since I no longer had to worry about the oak tree, I even took some of the money that I had won from Nathan, and I had a pool built in my backyard. Not long after it was finished, I had a pool party and invited all my neighbors over to proudly show off my new garden and pool, and had a blast. For years afterwards, I kept hearing how that party had been one of the best the neighborhood had ever seen. Thanks for watching. Like, share, and subscribe.